This looks just like the Oscar ceremony this evening, yeah? So, hold on a second. I'd like to thank my mum, my dad, my pet dog. Okay, I've been in education for 33 years, and I've never trust technology. There we go. First as a full-time teacher, and since 1996, when I left teaching, as a creative writing specialist. I now pass on my passion for the power of the written word to as many children and teachers as I possibly can, okay? My first book came out in 1988. Since then, I've had about 30 books published for infants and juniors. My most recent book is for teenagers, or young adults, as the publishing world likes to call them. On average, I get invited to about 100 schools a year, setting up creative writing workshops, having lots of fun. I've actually, if you do the maths, I've spoken to 500,000 children and 2,500 teachers over the years, and I love it. I love it. There's nothing more pleasurable than working with teachers and kids in the pursuit of fun. I don't know if there are any teachers in this room, but fun very often is, scream if you're a teacher. Why aren't you at home marking? Okay. Fun is a concept that's very alien to teachers, especially as we approach SATS Week. Sorry to swear here. I'm saying all this because I want to make it clear that these aren't the mere ramblings of an aging idealist. These observations are based on a considerable amount of experience and a reasonable amount of expertise. Like being invited into a school as a guest very often puts me in interesting positions. Now, I've spent many times in schools, and I think if you spend time in the primary school, you find there are female toilets and male toilets, but male toilets tend to be storerooms, okay? And this is a picture I took in a male toilet in a primary. I like to call it the substitute Jesus. It was in a Catholic school. Clearly, it's been kept there because there's lots of holy water in that room. This is another picture I took. Why buy toilet paper when you can use the discarded A4 folders that have been cluttering up the staff room for years? Over the years, I've had countless informal conversations with teachers about the structure of the curriculum, okay? And I haven't met a single teacher that says to me, yes, this is the way we want to do it. This is the reason I came into this profession. And there's nothing more disheartening than to engage in a conversation with a young, enthusiastic teacher whose aim is clearly to inspire and help her children fulfill her potential, who tells me they're about to leave the profession because they're fed up with being forced to see their children as mere data to be manipulated. So let me say from the outset here, I'm not here to knock teachers. Believe me, there are no shortage of experts around who can do that for you. My concern is the ever-narrowing and over-prescriptive primary curriculum that's created a fear of failure culture. It limits the ambitions of schools and it ultimately restricts the learning opportunities for their children. Now, I don't want to get too bogged down here in definitions, but this is a reasonable definition of, I'm talking about creative writing, so let's have this is a working definition of what I think creative writing is. It's not perfect, but we can work with that one. Because writing, for me, like all language, is a mode of communication. For me, it's the highest form of self-expression. The ability to create and share a story is what makes you and I different from every other creature. I mean, you can tell me why your grandmother limps. You can tell me why your uncle's in hospital. You can tell me what it is about your next door neighbor that annoys you. You can tell me if you want what you want to be when you grow up, okay? We all tell stories. We may not all be Billy Connolly's, but we all tell each other stuff. It's how we make sense of the world. I mean, all cultures All cultures are based on thousands of stories intrinsically woven together. I've always been fascinated with Iceland. That's the country, not the shop, okay? Apparently Iceland is the most literate country on earth. Stories that go back to the Viking times are really important on a very daily basis with lots of Icelandic people. Apparently, only 10% of Icelanders will flatly deny the existence of hidden people. The others either believe or they don't want to risk it, okay? Many Icelanders build these houses at the bottom of their garden where these little people can live, but only the chosen few can actually see who the little people really are, okay? Now, we can all verbalize stories, but if I were to tell you a story, I'd have no more than about a second to work out what's going to come out of my mouth. It's obvious, really, okay? I couldn't spend more than a second thinking about what I'm going to say. You wouldn't stand around waiting for me to tell you that story. But if you speak through your pen, which is what writing is, and you put your voice onto paper, no one else has to hear it until you're pleased with it. And that's what I try to impress upon children when I work with them in schools. Your voice on paper is infinitely more sophisticated than anything you can possibly say because you've got the luxury of time. And that's precisely what's missing in primary schools at the moment. Time. Time for kids to explore their ideas. Time for kids to find their voice on paper. This is important. Time for kids to get things wrong and not worry about it. Time for them to revel in their mistakes and learn from them. Now, I've got a crude example here of this fear of failure culture that is so pervasive. I was leading a workshop a few months ago with a group of Year 6 children. We were writing horror stories, and I wanted them to list things that they were afraid of. So they can have lots of ideas to put into their horror story, and completely unprompted, these Year 6 children made a list of the things that they were afraid of. Now, I didn't tell them to write this, the teachers didn't. We picked up this piece of paper, and I genuinely wanted to weep, okay? These are the things at the front of these Year 6 kids without being prompted. In most classrooms, practically every piece of writing is controlled by a teacher. Now look, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we should just walk into classrooms, give children a wad of paper and a load of pens and expect them to come up with a Booker Prize-winning novel, okay? I'm an author. I know how important it is to get things right, but then I know who I'm writing for. I know who my audience is. Children are seldom aware of who they write for. They have very little concept of the fact that their work is going to be read. And if we want children to be enthusiastic writers, and I hope we all do, then they need to feel the response of an enthusiastic reader. We need to laugh if they're trying to be funny, be disgusted if they're trying to be disgusting, okay? Now the question of what and how teachers teach has become, it's a sort of morbid relay race over the years, okay? Where the baton of control is keenly grasped by every education secretary who can't wait to bash teachers over the head with it when they grab it, okay? And a byproduct of that has been the growth of this thing called literacy. Now, literacy is a term that encompasses all possible forms of communication, okay? And it's driven by an ever-increasing obsession in the primary curriculum with assessment. Now, it goes like this. Let's break things down into as many component parts as possible. We'll decide which ones can be easily measured, devalue anything that's a bit wishy-washy like creativity, okay? And hey presto, you end up with a lovely set of boxes for teachers to tick so they can feel that they're doing their job properly. Okay. Now, I want to try and simplify things here. You can easily break down stories into what is written and how it's written. And look, I know this is going to feel a bit like a math lesson, my friends, but we've got the level of importance over there. And here is what I'd like to call the ideal situation, where the content of a story has got equal importance to all the various structural components that have been used to create it. There's the ideal situation. And a preschool child, hopefully, will turn up and be used to making up lots of stories, making marks on paper. And we're used to paying loads of value to that. You wouldn't go to a 3-year-old child and say, go away and reconstruct that story, it doesn't work, okay? So to begin with, you put loads of value on content, but ideally, as you children move through their career, you remain focused on the importance of content, but bit by bit, you pay equal emphasis to the structural side of things. But this is what's actually happening. You know, that's your preschool child who has been writing stories about monsters and things on bits of paper, and they come into school all enthusiastic, but bit by bit, as they move through their time in school, more emphasis is put to the structural things, the things that can be assessed and generate lots of lovely, comfortable Ofsted data, until you end up with this situation, and it's really no surprise that most secondary school children I meet are almost allergic to writing, okay? I received this email from a teacher a few months ago, okay, after I did an inset in there. It's not untypical to the responses I get from teachers. I'm no longer a teacher, just a force feeder of facts. Now, sometimes the curriculum reminds me of an assembly line in a car factory. Imagine that. Instead of the complete engine, they've laid out all the beautiful components, each looking beautiful and shiny, completely useless and unassembled. I mean, who would buy a car from a mechanic who had an idea like that? Now, recently I've been meeting lots of teachers who are frantically preparing for the new primary curriculum that's coming in this September, okay, which has a huge emphasis, increased emphasis on spellings, grammar, and structure. I was having a conversation with a Year 5 teacher who proudly told me that she is going to make sure that her class keeps writing creative writing stories. I was very pleased with this, very pleased. She said that there's 100 words, there's a prescribed list of 100 words that her children have to spell by the end of the year. And what she's going to do is going to take these 100 words, put them in a box, give them to the children, and every week they'll pick out 10 and write the story about it, which sounds interesting. And she had one of these boxes with her, and I asked if I could have a go. And this is what happened. I picked out these words, which will eventually come up. There we go. 12 proofs. Now, I'm not about the setting your homework, but those of you who are tweeting, wouldn't it be brilliant if you can work out some sort of story which would incorporate hindrance, stomach, government, foreign, I love it. Those were the 10 words I randomly picked up out of her box. I recently was in another classroom. This came up. I don't know if anyone has ever read White Fang. It's a story about a wolf that gets lost in the Canadian outback. It's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant book. And I was in this classroom, and this flashed up. I was quite excited. What's going to happen now, I thought. And then the teacher put this on board, and it's absolutely brilliant. She started reading it. Dark spruce forests frowned on either side of the frozen waterway. She was really performing. I thought, where are we going from here? And then this happened. This happened. A plus, anyone want to, who knows A plus B plus C? Anyone knows what we're talking about here? This is the sum. Adjectives plus verbs plus connectives. All of a sudden, the fantastic piece of literature had been reduced to a mathematical formula. Okay. And this is what the class proceeded to do. She outlined all the adjectives, she outlined all the verbs, she also outlined all the connectives, and we ended up with 31. 31 was the answer to this literacy lesson. It turned out that these children had previously done this to the works of Dickens, Walpurgo, Pullman, Dahl. Happily never Lishak, but then I don't sell that well, okay? And this has happened without once engaging with the text as powerful pieces of literature. I wasn't in the school to pass judgment, so I sort of smiled politely and left. But happily, the teacher seemed to have indulged in her own form of self-assessment, because there was something on her door which I took a picture of. And I hope the irony isn't lost on you. I'm not making this up. Although I'm an author, so maybe I am. Who knows? It doesn't have to be like this. It does not have to be like this. So much fun can be had with even the most mundane things. When I talk to teachers often about the wonderful world of punctuation, I often use this. Help me here. Someone punctuate this for me. Come on. Speak up at the back again. You're misplaced. A woman, without her, man is nothing. If you did it any other way, you are suspect. Here's another one. What is that in the road ahead? I like this one. What's that in the road? Ahead? A few years ago, I was asked to work with some... Oh, sorry about that. My dreams come true. A few years ago, I was asked to work with some 6-year-olds. I love working with infant children. And I brought out this picture, a picture of chocolate cake. Chocolate cake is a very important subject to 6-year-olds and me. Okay. And we started to discuss this chocolate cake. They didn't really know what I was doing. They knew I was the author, the guest in the school that writes stories, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't really know what was going on. We were just talking about chocolate. Okay? And I started to write down some of the words that they came up with, okay, quite randomly. And after that, I said, what we'll do is I'll join some of these words up and see if you can come up with some lovely sentences. And I clicked these together, and one child said, we cut a big slice of cake and we gave it a chocolate mouth, which I loved, because you can see a chocolate mouth, can't you? It's very impressive. Right? And I linked these together. And it says, Auntie Susan scoffed all the cake at my party and she got really messy. We were having lots of fun. Then I linked these ones together. And one child said to me, after thinking, she said, the scrumptious chocolate cake sat at the back of the fridge and looked like a great muddy mountain. Which was great fun. And then I was able to say to them that there have been billions of people on this planet that have spent thousands of years making countless different sentences in loads of languages, and you've just come up with a sentence the world's never heard before. Isn't that amazing? And it's that power of empowerment that I fear children are missing out on as the opportunities for creative writing become less. Children need to realize that they are authors too. But I think it goes beyond education. Without the joy of creativity, writing can quickly become a chore, and children will no longer see the point of it. They'll lose any incentive they might have had to find their voice on paper. To me, this is a basic human right. And to deny children the vital channel of self-expression that creative writing can give is tantamount to gagging them. Too often in school, we see writing as something that is done to children, as a punishment, okay? Like writing lines, something else that he's quite keen about. Okay? They need role models. How often do children see someone other than the child sitting next to them writing a story? They'll frequently sit up and see their teacher read something, but they very rarely have the experience of actually seeing an adult write something because they want to write it. We hear lots in education nowadays about accountability. These are the various people that I, over the years, have had to be accountable to. Sorry if I'm scaring some of you. These are the heads, deputies, Ofsted inspectors. But don't fool yourself, my friends, because ultimately, these are the people we are accountable to, and it's up to us to make sure we don't mess up their one and only chance. Thanks very much.